filmmaking can be a very expensive way to spend your time and money. But worse than the money you end up spending is often the money you end up wasting. So today I want to share with you some of the gear that I regret buying, and I'm also going to share with you some of my filmmaker friends and the gear that they regret buying. So, Christoph, you ever regret your purchases? Just so you know, all of this gear was long overdue to get rid of. I mean, it's all broken, it's old, it's been collecting dust for years. We did not waste perfectly good gear. Don't waste perfectly good gear. But today's video is all about the gear I regret buying. So let's jump into that. It's hard to talk about gear that I've wasted money on without talking about lenses, because in my 10-year career in photography and filmmaking, I've bought and sold just so many lenses. And the most recent one, which is unfortunate, was the 85 1.4 IS. And that's not my most recent purchase, it's my most recent lens that I bought that I wish I hadn't bought. The 85 1.4 IS from Canon is an EF lens. It's super sharp, it's stabilized, it's fast, has gorgeous bokeh, but unfortunately, I haven't used it since over a year ago when I was in Seattle with Christoph and Moment. So it's pretty obvious that it's not something that I need, and if I did need it for that shoot, I probably should have just rented it. So it's important that you don't just buy lenses really quickly, but that you actually experiment and figure out like every little bit about the lens you already have and see what you actually need, what holes you need to fill, and then try and buy the lens that way. Not just like, oh, that lens looks amazing, I'd probably use it. Actually pay attention to how you shoot and what you like to shoot, and make your purchasing decisions based on that. Also, this has got to be the longest I've ever ridden backwards in my whole life. Commitment! See, there's a really important lesson here, which is that regretting a purchase is rarely because the product itself is straight bad. Now, sometimes it is, and later in this video, I'm gonna tell you about a $5,000 product that I bought just this season, like in quarantine, that has been atrocious, like truly horrible. The worst thing I've ever bought, so stick around for that. And this rings true with pretty much everyone I spoke with while filming this video. See, the gear you bought, it might be really quite good, but you often don't know if it's the thing you actually need or if it's just something that you want.
Mr. Driftwood.
Mr. Hoopjalala. Is there a piece of gear that you bought that either just like turned out to be trash or just didn't fit your workflow the way you kind of wanted it to?
So two come to mind right away. The first one is, it was right when I started doing YouTube, but I was still freelancing, and I was like, I want to become a better DP. I felt like I needed to buy a gimbal. So I bought, and I needed it to be for my C300 Mark II, so I bought I think it was like a Movi M10 or something like that. It was like super cheap, and I was like, oh, I don't have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars, and I can learn it really well. I got it. I want to say I used it once. Once. And like, it was partly because I didn't actually need it.
Right.
But I thought I needed it, and it was more like, I'm going to learn it. And then I got into YouTube, and then I just started using completely different cameras.
Yeah.
And so like, I didn't need a massive Movi and whatever gimbal. So like, it was just useless, waste of money. The second one is more recent. It was when I hired my editor, Matt, now ex-editor, fired him. Just kidding. Check out his channel, everybody. So Matt was used to working on PCs. I only edit on Macs. And then I was like, I need to get you a computer. So he's like, well, I can work off a PC. We can just get like a really powerful PC. So I was like, okay, like let's go for it. And so we put, I think it cost like $6,000 or $7,000, like a lot of money. Like it was an expensive PC, but I was like, if it's gonna save us time editing and all that stuff, and it was nothing but headaches for us because like I'm on Mac, and we had to find all these different things to make it work on, like be able to put a hard drive into a PC and a Mac and all these little things, and then I go and like fix up an edit. And I'm not used to a PC. I feel like I'm like the biggest noob.
Right. It wasn't like a good collaborative tool.
Exactly. And then there's all these like random things, like there's like weird audio issues, and like Matt's having to spend time fixing those, and then I have no idea what the heck I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm trying to fix it. So it's just like it was hindering, even if it was faster, it was hindering our workflow so much that it would have been better for him to just edit off my iMac 2014 than this beast PC, so like it seemed like a good idea to put in a lot of money to fast and all that, and it was just wasted money.
That's a great answer.
It's on my desk in my office, and it hasn't been used for 6 months now.
One of my first jobs out of film school was working on IMAX movies, and I remember wanting to be professional, and when I showed up to set, the one guy was like, he was this British guy, he's like, where's your triplicator? And I was like, where's my what? And I quickly Googled it. It was called a glyph triplicator, which essentially triplicates, like makes 3 copies of your footage onto 3 different hard drives. He's like, how can you be a data manager and not have a triplicator? So I went and bought this like $800 triplicator online, and never used it. never needed it. But I always brought it to set in a briefcase, feeling like a professional. But it literally stayed in the wrapper, and I think I like sent it to the Salvation Army like a week ago. Like,
that's so funny. It's like you bought it because you felt self-conscious that someone on set thought you needed
totally.
it.
Yeah, and the guy made me feel like I was like, I didn't even know what it did. I just knew he was like, every person needs a triplicator. And I was like, okay, I'll get a triplicator.
I hope that guy just goes on set and just kind of peer pressures. He might just have stock in triplicator companies.
Right? Oh, totally. He tells you different gear that you've never heard the term before. So you're like, well, you just act, you're like, well, of course I have a triplicator.
Yeah.
Everyone has one.
There is one thing that I've spent a lot of money on recently that I kind of wish I hadn't.
Okay, let's find it.
But I do use that.
Whoa. What? Okay, look at my mobile.
So, how many are we able to show?
So you got a lot.
We can start small. So this is the DJI Copilot.
Okay.
It's like a Lacey collab. And so when I got my iPad Pro, I was like, I'm going to go mobile with my editing, and I'm going to do everything mobile. I'm not going to use my computer. I'm going to be light and efficient. And so I bought this hard drive. It's like 500 gig, and it has like a USB-C to connect to the iPad. It has a place for your SD card and all of the things that you think that you would need to edit on your iPad. But I don't edit on my iPad at all. Stepping up from there, we have the DJI Ronin S.
I was wondering if anyone would have a gimbal.
So I obviously got caught up in the hype when everyone was like talking about the Ronin S. And I was like, oh, this will be amazing. I'll get this and I'll use it and my shots will be so smooth. Oh my God, the smoothness of my shots. And I probably used it on maybe 3 videos. And then the bad part about all of this is that, so I bought this one like when it first came out.
Yeah.
And we're all like backlogged.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't get one. And so I found this other site. So I ordered this one first and it was on pre-order. Yeah. So I found this other site and it was like, oh, we have it in stock. So I ordered that one. So I actually have 2 of these.
No.
One, and this is how bad it is. The other one is still in the box that it got shipped in. Like, I haven't even opened up the box at all.
Jacques, you gotta sell that.
I've got to, yeah.
What kind of things have you mistakenly purchased, let's say?
Well, my little stack of things in front of me are a good example of a mistake. Basically, this is all of the things required to make a nice little camera shoulder mount rig that I bought back in the, I guess, 5D Mark II days.
Yeah.
Because I figured I'd be shooting everything shoulder mounted, so I should invest in the best. I got all Zacuto rigging, so I could, like prop it up here. And this is great gear. Like, it is really well made. It was very expensive. And you know how often I shoot with the camera on my shoulder?
How often?
I don't. Never, ever do that, ever.
My early days of filmmaking were very similar. Like, I just remember I knew so little that there was a point when I was like, do I need a matte box? Like, I still didn't know anything. But I was just like, I think it's important. I think it makes your image better. I had no idea why.
I think part of the unfortunate truth of buying all this stuff that you turn out not to need is it kind of is necessary. I don't know if you could go through a full career without making a bunch of dumb investments, because some of these things you just can't learn it until you've tried using it. Because you see somebody else that is using it successfully. I mean, maybe a gimbal could even be a good example. That I feel like everybody thinks they need a gimbal right now. But I know you don't use one that often. I use mine less and less.
I just gave all mine away.
Yeah, like
I just go on Twitter and be like, hey, first one to get it, you can have it. I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but especially in the early days of filmmaking for me, one of the biggest mistakes I would make, somewhat out of necessity, was buying the cheaper version of the thing I actually wanted. My first fluid head tripod was this like $60 Velbon tripod I bought from the local camera store. But within like 2 weeks, the fluid head started leaking, it was getting oil all over me, and it was just a janky piece of garbage. Again, this is not a knock on Velbon. This was 10 years ago, me buying the cheapest product I could find. This is my fault. And over the years, I've made similar mistakes, but now when there's something I know I need, I'll wait longer, I'll save longer, and make sure that when I buy something, I'm buying something that's built to last. Hey, what's good?
When we bought into the whole idea of getting a drone, we got the Phantom 4, which is fantastic. It was a great drone. But along with that, we had the idea of buying the Osmo Pro.
This was it back in 2016.
Like the little gimbal-y?
The camera that goes on the X-Fire on a handle, like a gimbal built in.
Yeah, it was the X5 camera with the Osmo handle. It was they call it the Osmo Pro eventually, but it was before the Osmo Pro was available. So we ended up having this like gimbal stabilized micro four thirds camera, which wasn't really all it was cracked up to be.
We thought it was going to be like such a game changer because it was right when we started YouTube and we've been used to using like 5D Mark IIs on like a actual Steadicam. So we were like, oh my god, this is going to be amazing. A little camera on a gimbal, like game changer for video. Then we started using it and it was just like, it wasn't.
Right, because you guys started on like a GoPro, right?
We started on the Osmo and then we got so sick of it that we just started using the GoPro for like 3 months.
How was that in comparison?
Well, it was a Hero 5 that we were using.
Yeah.
So it was, all the gripes that we had with the Osmo was mostly that it was hard to have spontaneity because you had to like take it out, set it up. It wasn't instantaneously didn't turn on instantaneously.
You had to like sync your phone and use your phone to like shoot everything. So by the time you like link the app up and got it all fired up and there was a firmware update, then you had to wait for that.
Yeah, it was like the opposite of running up.
Right. And am I right? Was the Hero 5, that was the first one that added, like, if you just hit the record button, it turns on and starts?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah. So that, from an ease of use standpoint, I mean, having that in my pocket, literally just take it out and hit record.
Yeah.
Everything's good to go. That's also, too, with the Osmo, is that you had to then manually set everything up. Like, you have to manually expose and everything. I think it didn't
you have to do that on a DSLR. It was way more cumbersome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're using like touch menus and sliders, and it just, I mean, it's like using a drone interface, but for a camera.
Alright, so, Christoph, what are we looking for here?
It's a camera that I purchased less than a year ago that I've used maybe twice in the last year.
While we're on the subject, what?
Well, this isn't exactly filmmaking equipment, but it is something I regret purchasing very much.
What is it? Tell me about it.
It's called the Solo Wheel, or the Elpots Shanghai Zima It's a company from Amazon that went out of business about a day after I bought it. And it was cheaper than a one wheel at the time. That felt like reason enough to buy it. Because I wanted an electric skateboard thingy, but I didn't want to spend the money that a one wheel costed. And I have it. Yeah, I don't think it's here. I think we gotta go down even more.
Okay, next filmmaking storage unit. Oh, I should probably hit record on my camera, huh?
I relate to that so heavily. I think it's easy to think that like a certain piece of gear is like, oh, that's the solution to this problem. But a lot of the times, like, you don't need it. So for example, like obviously FPV drones were like really, really big and are still big right now. Like, oh, I want to do that. We're going to be traveling. We do this cool car stuff. FPV's where it's at. I bought the drone during Black Friday in November of 2019. It didn't arrive until right before Christmas. And I've literally had it since then, have not plugged it in once. And the reason being is because the learning curve is so intense. So like I downloaded like the FPV program. I've been putting time into it. I crash all the time. I'm like, oh, I'm definitely going to crash this drone.
Yep.
So I've spent $1,500 knowing I'm going to crash it and have to go through that. And it's just like, I don't know. I haven't used it. My other drones are so much easier to use. And I literally just think it's going to sit on my shelf until I sell it.
Oh, wow. Yeah. You know what, though? What's interesting is I wanted to get into FPV, but that's one of the few times in my life I use self-control. And I was like, I don't think I'll go all in on this. And I think FPV is one of those things in filmmaking where it's like, you really have to go all in. You have to like spend hours upon hours. And, you know, Christoph's amazing at it, and he always says something like, for every like minute you spend actually flying the drone, you should be spending something like 20 minutes in the simulator. I'm like, I don't have time for that.
It's just the life of a YouTuber and production and everything else. It's so hard to want to practice too, and then the fear. It's like Chris Nichols, I think, was like, yeah, I'm on my 7th GoPro. And I was like, oh, that's how many dollars in cameras just because I crashed?
Yeah.
And it's like, so knowing that you can very easily crash a $2,000 item makes it very intimidating to want to like get into it.
This one's painful because it's within the last year, but I bought a teleprompter thinking it would fix my client shoots and help me make better YouTube videos. And boy, was I wrong.
Really interesting. So I made a What's Poppin' segment with Jacques in the fall. And that was the first time I'd ever used the teleprompter. And I was like, this is actually pretty cool. So yeah, what happened for you? Why did that not work out?
So I bought it for client videos because some of the corporate stuff, people just really struggle to like get the delivery right. It's like, oh, just buy a teleprompter and it'll make it easier. But if you're not practiced with the teleprompter, it makes it like 10 times. Like people are just slowly reading and they can't.
Oh, right. There's no life to their voice. It becomes very robotic and it feels like they're reading.
Oh yeah, it made the problem like 10 times worse. And then it made them flustered, and then you can see it outside. It did not help the client videos in the way that I thought. And the bonus was, hey, I could use this for YouTube stuff. And then I realized when I make YouTube stuff, I don't script my videos. And if I script them, it takes longer. And then when I script them, it's not how I write them. And so my delivery's clunky. And then I've got this like janky metal device on my tripod, and none of my gear can hold the teleprompter very well. So I love shooting on small cameras, but now I've got this like monstrosity of a Canon that I'm shooting my videos with for YouTube, and I suck at teleprompter delivery, and it doesn't feel natural. It was like, and I spent a lot of money on it, dude. It was expensive.
Right here. This is what we're after.
So neat.
And it's not even in here.
To your house.
Alright.
Oh, what? That's amazing. Well, the funny thing is you buy it, and then you're like, oh, I shouldn't have bought that. But then you end up buying it again, and then again, and again. And in my case, I did it 4 times, and I regret all of these.
Oh my god.
Like one of those things you feel like I need it. I have to have the POV angle. What if I need to mount it to something? But then every time I use it, I'm let down.
Yeah.
I get back, and it's never the way I wanted it. It's never pointing the way I wanted it. It wasn't even half the time. And I bought the next version because for some reason I thought the next version would make me suck.
I mean, like, GoPro is they've got to be the best. They're just a marketing company, I think. Like they're every time they put out a hype reel, I'm like, like that's the best thing. I have to have it. I'm like 1,000 frames a second. That's not true, but it feels like that's what.
I think what we need is the editor that made the hype reel. But I use my phone for that stuff now, so I would say like any kind of. I don't really have much experience with other brands of action cameras. I like the Osmo and stuff, but I can almost say like any small little branded camera like this, I've almost always regretted buying. And they didn't send me any of these. I bought every single one of these. And I regret each one that I bought.
Got it. This is your mic. I should give that back.
Yeah. That's not a thing I regret.
It's the FS5 Mark II, and I bought it last summer because I wanted to have a B camera for my FS700, which is also a Sony camera, and they have the same picture profile. It's just a lot smaller. It's the FS700 is like the size of this whole thing, and this guy's like half the size. So I was gonna use it for gimbal stuff, and it's got a nice form factor for, you know, off-the-cuff handheld things. And then a month later, I basically started shooting movies full-time. So I ended up going with a Red Epic, and I haven't used this at all since I purchased it. So I brought it home for the pandemic because I was like, oh, I should just use this for YouTube stuff. But if I have the Epic sitting there, I'm like, I'd rather just use that. So I probably need to sell this thing. Even though it's a fantastic camera, I don't really use it, and it wasn't cheap. And now I'm stuck with it.
So the FS5 Mark II is clearly an incredible camera. And the Canon 85 1.4 IS is an amazing lens, but like I said, sometimes it's just not the right tool for you. Or in this case, me and my friends. However, some products are not worth the money, and I regret buying them. But real quick, before we jump into that, let me tell you about something that's absolutely worth the money. If you're looking for something that is not a waste of money, then ExpressVPN, who is the sponsor of today's video, is 103% worth your attention, and most likely your subscription as well. If you don't know what a VPN is or what it does, it's essentially a service of software that you put on your computer, your phone, your tablet, yada, 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 that encrypts your connection to the internet. And what that means is that it's keeping your data safe. It's stopping other people and entities and governments and companies from spying on your online activity. And that's originally why I signed up for it like 2 years ago, year and a half ago. I don't know, I was at the old studio. So because I realized that if my job is primarily online and so much of our lives exist online now, I figured it was about time that I started taking my cybersecurity seriously. But beyond that, there also happened to be some like much more fun perks rather than just like staying safe. See, with a VPN, what you can do is you can route your connection through other countries. Why would you want to do that, you ask? You might not have asked. I asked. Rhetorical question. I live in Canada, just like many of my friends on the episode here today. And when some of our American friends decide to send us like, let's say a Saturday Night Live skit on YouTube, we can't watch it. It's blocked. However, using ExpressVPN, what you can do is you can select USA as your country to route your internet connection through, and ba-boom, blocked no more. And something that only recently was pointed out to me, I think maybe in a Johnny Harris video. It doesn't matter, but you can watch all of Rick and Morty on UK Netflix. So if you go to your ExpressVPN, route your internet connection through the UK, now you get to watch all of Rick and Morty. And people have been telling me to watch this for years. They're like, hey, Jesse, that's the show you're gonna love, because that's the kind of guy you are. And I was like, yeah, you're probably right, but I don't know how to find that stuff. Well, now I do. ExpressVPN, UK, Netflix, Rick and Morty! If any and all of this has sounded, interesting, exciting, enticing, enticing, click the link down in the description, expressvpn.com/Jesse Driftwood, where you can find out more how you can get 3 free months of ExpressVPN's service. Get at it, it's worth it. Now, let me tell you about my $5,000 mistake. This right here is the biggest waste of money that I have ever wasted money on. So back in mid-March, you know, the beginning of quarantine, of lockdown, I came to the studio and I grabbed as much stuff as I could to create a little home office in my loft/spare bedroom. Now there's an issue with that spare bedroom, which is that all the ceilings are like this, and I knew setting up a big aperture 120D with a big light dome was just not going to work. So I knew if I was going to be producing these YouTube videos from home, I was going to need to figure out a lighting solution. Around that time, Caleb from DSLR Video Shooter put out a video called like the biggest light ever or something like that, I don't know. And the light was this rolling, flexible bicolor LED panel that was a 4x4, so 4 feet by 4 feet, 600 watt bicolor light. And I watched that, I was like, whoa, that's kind of amazing. You know, I've been interested in getting myself a flexible light because they're very practical, very versatile. You can tape them to the wall, do all sorts of stuff with them. And he had a really good experience with that light. And so I, as someone who has no real experience with Falcon Eyes, went on to Falcon Eyes' website, and I saw that not only did they have that bicolor version, but they had an RGBW version. So what that means is that it's a rollable, hangable, mountable, 4 foot by 4 foot, bicolor and full RGB light panel. And I thought, this is exactly perfect. And I knew it was kind of expensive, you know, that like $4,000 or $5,000 Canadian to get it shipped here. Also, I might be a little off on that, but gosh, it was a lot. But I figured for the rest of quarantine, I could have it set up as my lighting in the loft bedroom studio office thing. And then afterwards, I'd be able to A, bring it on proper film shoots, lend it, rent it to friends, and then also rig it up to the ceiling in here. I know it's probably not wise to give my actual opinion on this light just yet, but initial impressions are very good. See, about an hour after I had set this light up at home, I noticed all of a sudden, all right, ignore the lighting here. I actually just set up the light and it looked fantastic. It's right here, it's a giant light there. It's very large, bouncing into the ceiling here, back onto me. It just stopped working. It just stopped working. Just completely out of nowhere. I don't really know what to do. That was an expensive light. Ugh. And I realized that no matter what setting I set it to, all of the tungsten LEDs on it were set to max brightness. So what that meant was I could never actually set the light to daylight because the tungsten LED bulbs were still firing. So that meant if I set the light to 10,000 Kelvin, I was actually getting like 4,500 degrees Kelvin. And that's only at full brightness because as I dim the light, only the cool white LEDs would dim, the warm lights wouldn't. Same thing if I put it into the color modes, I couldn't get colors because they were always overpowered by those tungsten LED bulbs. So I reached out to Caleb and I was like, hey dude, I don't know what's going on. This light is giving me like crazy issues. And he was like, oh man, I'm so sorry to hear that. I've always had great experiences with Falcon Eyes. And I know a lot of people that have had great experiences with Falcon Eyes. This is just my experience. So he put me in contact with someone that he knows at Falcon Eyes. I sent her an email, told her the story, and she said, I'm sorry for this response. It's kind of complicated, but she is a part of Falcon Eyes North America, and I bought the light from Falcon Eyes Hong Kong, and for whatever reason, they are two separate entities, and that Falcon Eyes North America actually doesn't endorse or sell this light because apparently they don't think it's fit for production, I guess, is the vibe that I got from her. But she put me in contact with the service person, and they sent me out a new control box. A couple weeks later, control box comes in, I set it up, and then within the hour again, exact same issue. All the tungsten lights are firing at full power. I've lost control of color, I've lost control of bicolor, just useless. So I reach out to Falcon Eyes again, and each time I've sent videos showcasing exactly what's going wrong, and their response, A, not super empathetic, not super believing me. B, they do decide they're gonna send me an entirely new control unit and LED panel, both of which they said that they've tested thoroughly to make sure that they work. A few weeks later, they both show up. We rig it up into the ceiling here, trusting that this time it's fixed. Again, within an hour, same exact issue. So this has now happened on 3 different control boxes and 2 different LED panels. And at this point, I'm like, I'm done with it. You know, I bought the light 3 months ago and I have not gotten to use it, and it was very expensive. So now I'm at the point where if I want them to replace this, I have to send this all back to them in Hong Kong. And if I want a refund, I also have to send this back to Hong Kong. So that's what I'm doing. I will be shipping this 75-pound bag the size of 2 golf bags back to Hong Kong. I have no idea how much that's gonna cost me, so that hopefully a month from now, I'll actually get a refund. So this just goes to show, not that Falcon Eye's products are bad, because actually everyone I've spoken to seems to have had a good experience. However, I saw this light online, I could not find any reviews of it, and I went ahead and ordered it, shipped it from across the world, just trusting that it would work, and trusting that there would be like a pro level service for what felt like a pro level light. And I was wrong. So I don't know what to do about that. Don't buy this light. I think it's called the Falcon Eye's RX 7120. It's a 600 watt bicolor full RGB spectrum flexible LED panel, and I hate it with everything in my butthole. You know what? It's late, so that's why you get words like butthole in my video. If you're still here, honestly, thank you so much. I know this was a very long video and very different from my normal videos. In fact, I didn't even feel like I needed to go back over there to film this because, like, if you're this far in, you clearly will watch anything I do. Yeah, the video is a weird style, and I think it's partly because I'm just sick of my own face. I'm sick of my own perspective. So I'm hoping to start including more people and more perspectives into my channel, because you ever just get so tired of yourself? Anyways, if you want more of me, like and subscribe. I'm a tired puppy.
It's in my coffee.